It was not that long ago that we last talked about Conn director trombones on the channel. This past summer, I reviewed a trombone that I'd had for a little bit that was the Conn 16H director, and you can find the video up in the top right corner in the card if you want to learn more about it. So why is it that we're back again talking about a Conn director trombone? Well, this one is actually a fairly unique one that I picked up off of a friend of mine online just out of sheer curiosity, and I've had a lot of fun with it, and I figure it's different enough from the 14H that it kind of warrants its own little show and tell video. So let's get started. During the middle of the 20th century, C.G. Conn's line of instruments, dubbed the Director or Shooting Star line as they're sometimes affectionately known, absolutely dominated the student brass industry. They were made in absolutely huge numbers, distributed to school bands absolutely everywhere, and honestly, they're pretty well reputed today. I've played a lot of directors across various instruments, whether trumpets, cornets, trombones, etc., that actually do play fairly well, and both of the 14H director trombones that I've owned over the years have also played really nicely. This one is a little bit different in a couple of ways. It does have the shooting star and marcher emblem that we've come to know and love on just about any middle of the 20th century director, but we've also got a couple of different things to look at here. On the cork barrel, we start to see a little bit more info. It says 16H and a serial number starting with GD57 and a few more numbers. This is an instrument that was made after Conn's move from Elkhart, Indiana to Abilene, Texas in 1972. And we've talked a couple times on the channel about how people tend to regard instruments from the Elkhart period much more highly. It is said that Conn's quality control took a significant downturn during the move to Abilene and never really recovered from there. This is an Abilene instrument, and just to be completely honest with you, most of the Conns I've owned have been Abilene instruments, and I've scarcely ever been disappointed by them. And I'm certainly not disappointed by this one. But anyway, as far as that serial number, GD5, that should tell us about all we need to know. That first letter, G, indicates 1970s Abilene, so essentially 1972 to 1979 or 1980. Then the 5, the first number, indicates the year that it was made in, so in this case 1975. And then that second letter that we skipped over, the D, that actually indicates the month. So D is the fourth letter of the alphabet, and the fourth month of the year is April. So this trombone was made in April of 1975. It's a little bit of a confusing system until you get your brain around it, but if you want to do some further reading on Conn serial numbers, I will leave the Conn Loyalists page on Conn serial numbers in the description below. That page is maintained by Christine Dirksen, and it's an absolute wealth of Conn information, but actually, this instrument is not on it, and that's part of the reason I was drawn to this instrument and ended up buying it for my friend. It turns out, once I emailed Christine, I found out that she doesn't actually include Abilene models on the Conn Loyalist website, and she only goes as far as the end of Elkhart history to actually keep models up to date on there. But nonetheless, this is a fairly scarcely known trombone, and something really interesting that I got with the full outfit here, if you will, is I didn't just get the trombone, I got what I believe to be the original Abilene production case, and it's a really interesting one. It's got this nice red velvet lining on it. Unfortunately, in shipping, a lot of it kind of came loose. Some of the panels are loose, and the corners on the case especially are fraying and coming apart, but it is a really cool case. I haven't seen a lot of Conn instruments packed like that. I've seen Abilene cases with blue velvet, but this is actually the first red or maroon velvet Abilene case that I've seen. Now, as many trombonists will know, a rather lamentable feature of many Conn trombones is what we call Conn wear on the inner slide. Unfortunately, it has a name, and that's because a lot of Conn trombones get worn pretty quickly on the inner slide. And this is a fairly young instrument in Conn terms. It's only from 1975, so that's really unfortunate. But the nice thing is, despite that little bit of wear in a couple of places, I haven't noticed any loss of compression on this instrument, aside maybe from that water key cork needing a replacement, so I'll make sure to do that. But what distinguishes this 16H from other Conn director trombones I've played, besides visually, of course, all this nickel plating as opposed to clear lacquer over brass, is the fact that the slide section bore of this instrument is Conn's number 3 bore, which is 0.500 of an inch, as opposed to most other directors, particularly from the Elkhart era, having bores of 0.484, which is Conn's 2.5 bore. And oftentimes when we think of 500 bores, especially on student or intermediate instruments, we mentally pair them with 8-inch bells. But the bell flare on this is actually 7.5 inches, like most of the other director trombones that I've encountered. So 500 bore, 7.5-inch bell, kind of an interesting set of specs, and I actually really like this combination. Now, this trombone, like other Conn directors, plays very easily, but also with a great maturity of sound. And that surprised me a little bit. If there is one complaint that I were to have of the earlier Elkhart era directors that had the number 2.5 bore, it would be the fact that they could end up sounding a little bit thin if you push them too hard. It depended on the exact instance of director that you were playing on, but that was my overall impression. With the 500 bore and the 7.5-inch bell, you get a really great blend of projection, cutting power, roundness, fullness, and the obvious implication when you see a fully nickel-plated trombone like this that has the Conn counterweight on it is, well, Sam, how does it compare to the Constellation Model 48H? And that's one that I've reviewed on the channel, and I'll have you click up there if you want to learn more about it, because it's a really cool, really fun to play trombone. But honestly, this is a little bit of a different beast. What I mean by that is the Constellation 48H had this really complex timbre to it. It had a whole bunch of layers that you kind of had to parse through and tool appropriately for which genre you were playing. It's super cool, and it's probably one of the best trombones to use in a recorded commercial setting, but it is a little bit interesting to play and a lot unlike some other professional small bores out there, even other Conn professional small bores like the more ubiquitous 6H. The 16H, meanwhile, is not a complex tone. It's just pure, unadulterated jazz trombone, and it sounds perfect in that instance. And that's really all you can ask of it. It's like a standard garden variety yellow brass King 3B in that respect. And in fact, I was amazed as the owner of a King 3B, although the Silversonic variant, how similarly in a lot of ways this horn plays. It's a little bit lighter and more nimble potentially because of the smaller construction overall and the lack of an F attachment, because my 3B is actually a 3BF Silversonic. And this horn does also have a little bit of slotting weirdness in my opinion. With both a good 3B and a good 48H Constellation, the sound just falls out the bell. And pretty much whatever you put into it, you get out what you expect to. This, sometimes I had to corral a little bit and find the slots. Different Conn trombones can also have varying levels of mouthpiece receptibility. This here is just my main jazz trombone mouthpiece. It's a Bach Corporation 6 3/4 C. Really wonderful size if you ever get to try one. But in this instrument, it gets really, really zippy. You get a lot of front end, really strong articulations, a lot of sting in the tone if you push it. Meanwhile, if you use something like this Mount Vernon era Bach Corporation 9, it's a little bit narrower and a little bit deeper, you get a really light and nimble and crisp experience, especially in the upper register. And then something I've noticed works weirdly well on a lot of Conn's small and extra small bore trombones is this Bach Corporation 5GS. So actually the widest and deepest and most open-throated one of all, but Conn trombones seem to like it. Or I should say Elkhart Conns seem to like it. This trombone kind of backs up a little bit. I think it's got a nice fat sound with the 5GS, but it was tiring me out substantially. And in fact, the sound darkened so much that I could almost envision using this for some classical playing. Overall, I'd say the 16H spans the full gambit from ballad playing to lead playing fairly well in jazz settings. I would say it lists more towards the lead and section style of the fence rather than the ballad side necessarily. I have played better small bore ballad trombones like the Cleveland Superior, which you can find again in the top right corner, but this does fairly well for everything. The one gripe I did have is that with smaller, tighter mouthpieces like the 6 3/4 C, it would back up a little bit in the low register, especially if I'd been playing in the upper register for a while before that. But of course, if I started in the low register or made a concerted effort to stay down there, it had the signature Conn blat on all of the pedal tones. Now, most unfortunately, to nobody's surprise, I've done the thing and ended up with way too many trombones under one roof. So sadly, this one is going to be on the chopping block, but it's been a really fun few months with it. I've really enjoyed getting to know it. And honestly, the reason I'm getting rid of it is just because it's too similar to my King 3B. So I think that says something to its credit, that it plays much like a King 3B at a much more modest price. So hopefully you enjoyed that take on the Conn 16H Director. Hopefully it turned out a little bit more brief since I just wanted to talk about some of its special features compared to other directors. Really great horn. Keep an eye out for these nickel-plated directors. They really outplay their price tag. Until next time, make sure to watch some of those videos linked in the cards if you haven't seen them yet, and I'll see you on the flip side.